Connection established.
Hey, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Mr. B, your host. And tonight, we're going to be talking about some delicate subjects regarding the education curriculum, the way we're being led down the mainstream, where we're taking our choices are taken away from us. We've got to comply with the system. Anyway, first of all, I want to introduce my special guest, Miss Heidi Pope. She's Reboot. I forget the Reboot now. I'd like to introduce you to her. Welcome aboard there, Heidi.
Hello. Howdy and hello.
I'm glad to have you here. And I'll introduce my good friend, Gerald. Good morning to you there, Gerald.
Hello.
Or good afternoon to you, I should say.
Good evening.
Yeah. And my co-host, Mr. Professor Bauer.
Greetings, everyone.
There you go, Prof. And Professor Heidi. Heidi, the Professor. Heidi,
Cheers.
Gerald.
Cheers.
Nice to cyber meet you.
Well, because he's Mr. Golden Tonsils himself, you know, the man with the golden tonsils, you know, like James Bond, you know, he's the linguist of the show. Wonderful man. Well, listen, I love having him on because he gives me a break, because when he starts talking, I can shut up.
It's the best. I got to get my popcorn for it.
He's a legend. I'm really upset today because our good friend, Mr. Jim Goodall, could not make it. He's got family activities today. So he's out making the family happy, doing your thing. But he will be back again eventually. He always is. Like a bad penny turns up, doesn't he, Robert?
Yes, he does. And he's a shiny one at that.
Yes, that's right. Anyway, I want to let people know out there, look, I've been getting some complaints, Prof. I've been getting some complaints because I'm not doing my shows regularly. Now, I'm going to put it out there to people that I have a life. And see his face? He doesn't care. But I have a life. And I have a wife, a family, and hey, they come first. I do this. This is a non-profitable show. I'm not here for the money. I'm here for the fun and for the things I believe in. It's a platform where it's my soapbox. I can get on it and say what I bloody well like, and so be it. But it's only my opinion. Doesn't make me right though. It's only my opinion. Everybody's opinion is worth something. It's valuable. Today, and I'm going to put this in Heidi's ball court soon. It's about choices. It's about choices in the education system. From the moment we're born, we're told what to do by mum and dad, a slap across the backside, and eat your meals. If you don't eat, you go without and get sent to bed. Then we go to school. And when we go to school, we sit next to the individual that's next to us or whatever, and we learn the same thing every day. What I learn, they learn. Now, it's kind of parrot fashion type of teaching, I suppose. It becomes it's like a repertoire, and it's like everybody in the school itself is learning the same stuff. But in that class, everybody's learning the same. Next class that comes in, they're going to learn the same stuff. Nothing different. It's all part of what they call the curriculum. Unfortunately, they do not tailor it for individuals. And where the problem comes is you've got children that suffer, but I wouldn't call it learning abilities, disabilities, or learning challenges. They are not as quick as some, and some pick up quick and some don't. But it doesn't make them stupid. It makes them that, hey, they could have talents other people don't have. And that's the thing we've got to get out of here. Now, I believe in the three derivatives, reading, writing, and arithmetic. I believe that's very important. But when we've got other subjects that children are made to do, things like domestic science as they progress through school, personally, we can do without domestic science at school. If you're hungry, you go and learn to bloody cook. And mum and dad will teach you anyhow. And if you're hungry, you find a way. You'll go and get a pizza anyhow. And who actually, let's face it, they're not everybody's going to be a chef. You know what I mean? And again, history. If you're a history buff, fine. If you're not a history buff, why can't you do the subjects you enjoy doing? That's what I'm saying. Now, if you've got your reading, writing, then they say, okay, you've got to do arts, you've got to do music, and you've got to do sports, and you've got to do this. Now, all this is time consuming. So therefore, the children themselves, the ones that get left behind, the ones that are struggling, they've got to do all this, and they're going to keep struggling while they're doing all the other stuff. Why can't they sacrifice, do something? Look, I'm not into sports, so can I do an extra session in maths, or can I do an extra session in whatever, English or whatever, so they can catch up with the rest. They shouldn't have to do curriculum outside school or do or in America you have what they call summer school, isn't it? I think they call it or something like that. But for those who are struggling to need to catch up to get the marks. I know there's
we used to call it actually there was a combination of summer school and what I spent a lot of time in. We called detention.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But as I said, I'm going to pass it all over to you guys in a minute because I like starting it off. And we're doing subjects which is unnecessary. I mean, look, I'm not a rocket scientist. But why do I need to know algebra and trigonometry? I mean, I don't need it. I mean, I'm not going to apply it. So what's use? So wouldn't I be better if I want to do music? I could take up music. Or if I have artistic tendencies and like in art or pottery or creating something, I should be able to channel myself in that direction and be encouraged to do it. And this is where I brought Heidi on tonight because Heidi does a lot of these. Is it homeschooling, isn't it, Heidi?
It is. It's an enrichment center. So we're at a learning center and it's Steiner based. So it's very Waldorf without the corporate sponsors that Waldorf now has out here.
Well, we're just wondering, because I listened to you actually saying it's the way you greet each student each day, handshake, eye contact. I mean, I take notice of this stuff. And I think that's very important. It's very important because each person should feel like they're a valuable individual. And so it should be, but I feel sorry for the kids that are made to do subjects while they're struggling in other fields, and they should be given the choice to, I'll do extra English classes rather than go and play football. I know sports is that, but then again, they can do all their sports activity in their own time. And I'm a firm believer when a student goes home, you shouldn't go home to do the mathematics and do English and study at home, because when you go to work, you don't go home and study, do you? Well, I mean, you go home and rest because let's face it, if you're working all day, you want to rest in you or spend time with your family or doing the. I know you might have a different opinion there, Heidi, but I'm a firm believer. If they're going to do homework, why not do homework on something? Hey, bring up a subject, bring it to work. Bring it to school. write about it, what you're interested in. Right now, if a child can come in and he's into poetry, he can share his poetry, and then the educator can turn around and say, okay, we can lead him, we can direct him into the areas which he's most talented in, which writing, stories, poetry, screenwriting, but they're not making that available for the young kids. So the young kids get left behind, they struggle, they don't get the opportunities when they leave school, they don't get the opportunities to get into the right colleges they want to. So literacy is affecting a lot of what I call working class people, unless you belong to the actual in crowd, you're outside, in the cold, and you get left behind. But again, mainstream education, I feel, is a set of programming that they don't want you to think outside the box. You learn, you absorb what we tell you to believe. Don't question it, and that's the part I find, which is kind of, hey, in a class they should have a group where we can sit down and brainstorm. Come on, get your message out there. What is it you want to say? And watch and have everybody else's opinion to think about it and ponder over it. It's like we're doing now, where you can have a round table discussion and get other people's opinions and insight. Because even educators, they can't assume they know, because life itself is a learning process itself. It doesn't stop, and like what you today understand and can evaluate, 5 years down the track, you might see it totally different, because the systems changes, it evolves constantly. That's just my little input. So I'm going to put it back to you, Heidi, and see what you've got to say about all this.
Well, my first thought, like when you were saying reading, writing, arithmetic, for sure, it's important. However, it's been, I think, criminal what they've been doing lately. And that's starting younger and younger and younger. Because a child's work, especially kindergarten, the young ones, their play is their work. That's the work. And to be developmentally ready to take on academia, I think that's where we suffer. And so that's where our center comes in, and the nurturing. Steiner's all about the mind, body, will. These children, their lights are intact. And when they're not, usually when they leave us, it's back on. That's really important. And we do like the skills. We do, like, for instance, my daughter's in 7th grade there, and they only meet 4 days a week for the 7th graders. And they're with 7th and 8th. And she leans toward the art. So yes, they have a huge presentation coming up, and her educator's like, focus on the art part, because she knows she struggles with the essay part, and that'll be a presentation, but show us in the art your work and put your time into that. So yeah, these educators, you take the time with each child. I'm now a lead educator for the 3rd graders, and I have a range, we're homeschoolers. So everybody comes from a different background, and they do things differently at home. And this came about March 2020, by the way. My kids were at a private little Waldorf school while I had a household working. I walked away from motion picture, for medical choice, and I jumped in. Oh, whoa. Hello. And then I jumped in, and then I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Even though I went to DePaul, I went to university to study to be a teacher, and then I went in motion picture and forgot it all. Also, my kids didn't want me to be their teacher. They want a teacher. They want me to be mom. So I hired out a teacher to teach in the backyard. And then when we found the center that never closed down, it's full of like minds, full of conscious kids, full of conscious families, full of families that do not subscribe to the system, the state-run systems, the old way of doing things. And they want sovereign, critical thinking children. And so this place, I'm like, hey, do you need any help? And so it's my 2nd year working there. And now I'm a lead, and I'm the only class that's outside. And these kids are incredible. The range I have, though, there's one child who's almost 10, who could be on the spectrum. We don't know. We're not labeling, but his light is on. He's there. He struggles with academics, but he struggled at his other schools for kids kicking him out and bullying him because he wasn't as smart. Here, he's strong, We put him to work. He helps us lift. He does other things. And this child is blooming. And now he wants to digest the information. So he's going to start learning now. And then you've got these kids that need to be challenged. I'm like, I'm behind the chalkboard Googling stuff. I'm like, did I spell that right? Like they catch me. They're really good. And I'm like, I got to step it up with these guys. And that's in one class. And you have to have that range. And I tell you, the main thing they need is nurturing. That's the deal. They just a nurturer, someone to connect. I've heard horror stories of the state systems where, like you're saying with the homework, they go to their class. It's like a presentation, if that. Then they go home and they have 3 hours of homework. And that was what should have been done in the class. That's, like I said, they're memorizing songs this weekend because we're going to build a shelter. It's different everywhere, but I have to preface this to anybody watching. Everything is a choice. It's all a choice. I've always had a choice of how I was going to do things. I was a single mom when I started. Sorry, I got distracted by tech. I was a single mom when I started, and I held on to my daughter until she was 6. We went to the library. They'd have a little program there. She still calls it that. I went to library school. That was a 1 day a week thing because I felt like I was giving her something, but I also was her main educator. And when it came time to go to school, I started going to all my local areas. At the time, I lived in North Hollywood, and I did my radius so far. I'm like, these schools, there's metal detectors, like you have to be on waiting lists for years to get into just what they consider a really affluent, like really good school. And I was still so unimpressed. There was no light on with any of them. It was about the parents, really. Is the parents showing off kind of show or school? And so my mom's like, why don't you look at Waldorf? Is there anything like that, or like a Montessori kind of thing, or something, a little more hippy dippy? And I wound up finding a sweet little parent-run center. And I walked on campus and you could feel the energy shift. You're like, oh, this is it. The children were hanging from the trees. There was grass. They were planting. They were being children. And I enrolled my daughter. And at that time, she was second year kindy. So she's about 7. And then my son started at 4 in pre-K. And they thrive on that system. I know I'm talking a lot here. Sorry, I'm going to give you a chance. But we continue that now. We're just not in a Waldorf fancy school. Basically, WISC, Waldorf Institute of Southern California, super agendified. When everything happened in 2020, they just got in line and they're still doing it. And that just doesn't align with us. So I had a choice. I do something else. And we all have choices. It's a really big community out here of homeschoolers, by the way. But it's hard to say homeschoolers because we're at a center.
Well, what I've also noticed too, I mean, I can't speak about America. I mean, because it's another world away for me, But I've lived in the Philippines. My wife's a Filipino lady, and I've noticed that, like my grandson just arrived from the Philippines. He's 7 years old, and he is brilliant at mathematics, and he can read fluently. At 7 years of age, and now he's playing the piano, and he gets there and he just goes dun, 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 and he says, "I'm done." And we kind of, oh yeah, okay. But when I was 7, I was still playing with blocks, learning my ABCs. But you find in places like through Asia, and like especially in Japan, also the pressure, they get into school as young as possible, and they are pushed to achieve. And the suicide rate is so sky high in Japan, right? More so. But in the Philippines, they strive because it's the only way out of the ghettos, as you might say. It's you either starve or die, and die, that's eat or die. That's it. There's no ifs or buts about it. And it's sad. It's sad. Because when we come to like Australia, we have what they call preschool. And I totally agree with you there. When it comes to children, they should be able to go to school and play with Play-Doh and building blocks and be creative in their imagination. And that's all part of a mental development. And it also helps them to use both sides of the brain hemisphere, Even playing games, catching ball with the left hand, catching balls with the right hand, and it's all part of mental development before you actually start them off on what do you call it, like reading, writing, and rudiments. What do you call it? It's before you start them off. It's an exercise for the brain. So what's your thought on this, Prof?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts.
Go for it, my friend.
I'm
sure Miss Pope would be, Mrs. Pope would be lovely to hear your thoughts.
Well, I've actually, so I've got a number of observations, and I've been on beating this drum of the demise of our education system for a number of years. I think that it's really, there's been an infection, if you will, over the last 3 decades at least, where it's been really pushed hard. And I've got a regular mantra of what happened is there was one main switch, and that was changing the entire experience from how to think to what to think. So there was a complete structure of content that was devised around that has been the main driver of the content that's gone into, and it's really not even an education system, it's a schooling system, which is, if you, Heidi, I am, as Mr. B alluded to, I'm an aspiring linguist. I'm a semiotician. So the etymology of words is really important to me. And one of my core concepts is that language is the operating system of the mind. And when people realize the importance of words and the definitions and how they're constructed to create ideas and concepts and exploration, observation, speculation, everything that we experience as humans, when you look at that, you start to find that a lot of the words that you're using don't really fit the experience that you're having. And that is part of the what to think mantra that has gone in there. And one example, you were talking about Japan being, in Japan, the word for student is ka, K-A, okay? And so we would typically, they would translate it from Japanese to English and it would become student. And it has 2 different meanings, though. When we use the word student, it's somebody who is studying something to an end result. The Japanese term for student in ka means that they are a student of it. So there's a different connotation to the way that when studying or being a student of something is applied. So in the martial arts, in particular, in Japan, you're a student of the martial arts forever. You are always a student. And it goes back to something else that you said again, Mr. B, about learning. Learning is something that we are constantly doing. It's something that never ends. But if we don't realize that's what's going on, then we miss a lot of the great opportunities that consciousness and universe and reality around us provides us to learn from. So having said all that, Heidi, you mentioned that you were in the Waldorf system, which was started by Steiner, but then you mentioned that the one you're in now is more Steiner-esque.
Well, they adhere to a Steiner type curriculum, but we are not affiliated with WISC and I guess you could say it's not a brick and mortar school. It's kind of a small business. It's a learning center. It's just a couple days kind of thing. So we're off any state mandates. We're off grid a little bit.
Yeah, the original, when Steiner created the Waldorf system, I mean, that was a major change in the way that education was done and schools were set up. And I think it was one of the more profound ones. But are you familiar with Sir Ken Robinson?
No, and I probably should be.
So
write that down.
Highly recommend a video that he's got on YouTube. You can just do a search for Ken Robinson and education. And this is from, I think, at least 8, maybe 10 years ago. And it's done in a whiteboard animation. It's him giving a talk, but they did all the animation around what he talked about. And his main premise was this, and it's very captivating in the way that they do it. What he did is he broke down the origin of the current education or schooling system that we have, and how that started in the Victorian kind of era in the 1700s. All of a sudden, the growth of agriculture and these events in technology and civilization and cities started requiring some kind of workforce that needed information in order to participate in the society. So the original schools were the monasteries and monks, but then they said, well, we've got this agricultural thing, we have this mechanical thing, we have this building thing, this masonry thing that we need workers. So they created a system of schooling, and he gets into some awesome detail about this. And I don't think if people realized, they would see more of that output of that into what we have today, because essentially it's kind of like the well, not necessarily Minority Report, but in 1984 in Orwell's in that movie, in that book, the idea of stamping out. You have a form and you take the mold and you smash it and you go, okay, there's one. You do another one and you keep repeating them. And that's essentially what he talks about in this presentation about the origins of our schooling system. It was organized around trying to create assets and resources for the ruling class. So you have, in fact, the whole thing of the reason there's summer break is so that the little assets could go from school to go help the farm, right? And do the harvest and do the chores during the summer. So one of the things that I think is incredibly important in the idea of education is understanding how the mind works, how the individual works. And this is what Steiner really got into with Waldorf. And this goes back again to what you were saying, B, about giving people the opportunity to explore the things that interest them, right? Just because you might be good size doesn't mean you want to go do sports. Just because you seem to have a mathematical mind or an affinity for numbers and so forth, and you can figure things out, doesn't mean you want to go play an instrument. Just because you really enjoy art and drawing doesn't mean you're going to get science. And the idea is that you really need to expose, not educate the children in the beginning. They need to be exposed to different fields of knowledge and different skill sets and see where their talents are naturally drawn towards. If that occurs, then you're going to have less consternation and you're going to have a lot more productive people, because they're going to be given the opportunity to pursue that passion, that interest, that resonance that they have with whatever that subject and information might be. And one of the things that I mentioned, we had detention I spent a lot of time with in school. One of the things that we had when I went to school was shop class. And in shop class, we had wood shop, we had metal shop, we had all kinds of different things that we went, and there was a shop with all the tools and the machines, and we had to go in there and work with our hands. In essence, the trades. Okay. The trades are one of the areas of knowledge and education that a lot of the kids were exposed to, they might find a proclivity for. They might find a passion and an interest for, but because all of that's been removed and all of it's been replaced with not how to think, but what to think. And then there's been this indoctrination through this infected parasitic mind nonsense of what we typically refer to as, an ideology of progressive neo-lib kind of stuff. You end up with all these disconnected ideas from gender to race to class and all these other things. And it just becomes nothing but a confusing environment of chaos and crap.
Boom.
Yes, I can relate to you there, mate. I totally relate to you. I remember, I went to a convent school when I was a young fella. I mean, I remember my first teacher, and I mean, oh God, I was young. Sister Judy, her name was, lovely lady. Then as the years progress, I mean, dog's trying to get in on the show. Anyway, as I aged and we progressed through primary school, there was this particular teacher, and she was a dragon, man. She scared everybody. She was like something out of a horror movie. I mean, she would literally punch you in the back and do all these things. You know, I'm not joking. I mean, I'm going back a long time now. I'm 73. You know, so they had martial, what's it, corporal punishment in those days. Yeah, it's literally 6 cuts of cane.
My mom was beat by some nuns. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. So don't mean that they're supposed to be the fair agenda and in the love of Christ and all that stuff, but they are vicious. I mean, I don't know why, but anyway, cut the story short. I remember a time I was given homework. I had to do the catechism. I had to kind of, I think it was about a full paragraph. I had to memorize it, and then I had to write out what does it mean. You know, that was my assignment, to write out 500 words. What's the message I got out of it? Now, what has that got to do with education? I mean, sorry, yeah, it might help your writing skills and your spelling, but why do I need to learn the catechism? I mean, I'm a young fella. Anyway, I remember going to school, and and this particular teacher, she says, okay, I mean, you're going to have a bit of a giggle here. She says, okay, my name's Terry. Terry. Yep. And I just put my head in my hand, a young fella. I was in 6th class last year in high school. And I said, oh, what the F and hell now? And she heard me say it. This is my language, you know. And she said, come out front here now. What did you just tell me? And I wouldn't repeat it. She says, you go to Sister Superior and you tell Sister Superior what you just said to me. And so I went down and knocked on the door outside Sister Superior's office, and she kind of put the glass down and she kind of looked down and said, oh, yeah. You again? and anyway, she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, Sister Brennan just told me to come in to tell you what I said. But it sounded like I told her to go and get, well, which was kind of, it was wrong of me to do that, but I was a cheeky little bugger, you know, because I felt like I was being picked on for nothing. And off she dragged me off to the class. No joke, mate. I was strung up by one arm like that, right? And now punching me in the back. You know, nuns used to wear this big leather belt around their waist. Then they had this big cross stuck in the belt. And off that belt, they always carried a chain of keys. She had the keys in her hand. She just constantly beating me in the back. I know this is irrelevant, but still, no joke. By the time I went home, I said, I got in trouble. And of course, my mum gave me a slap across the leg saying, I tell you, behave at school. And I said, well, I've already got punished, Mum. And she said, what'd they do? And I shouted me back. My mum saw black and blue. She went up to the school and she actually grabbed that nun by the scruff of the neck. She said, discipline my son, but you do not. and I saw my mum doing this and went, oh my God, you know, what have I done? What have I done? I never did swear again. I wasn't swearing at a nun. I was kind of saying it to myself, but this nun heard me say it. But the thing was, this catechism, it really played no part in my life. What's the importance? What's the big importance? If they want to turn around and say, write a poem, Terry, well, hey, I'm great at writing poems.
Well, it's because it's not because it was important to you, it was important to them. That was the whole reason that we all got the information and the classes and crap that we were not interested in. For example, I couldn't stand English. I failed in. In fact, my 5th grade teacher's name was Mr. Funk. So we would all come in, smart little assholes. I grew up in Southern California, Heidi, and we'd all come in and say, well, good morning, Mr. Funk. How's Mrs. Funk and all the little funkers? And there's it was no doubt why I failed that class. Well, now, 50 years later, I'm totally into English. When I went and did biology and science, That stuff fascinated me so much that I never had to study. I saw it. It was so fascinating. I instantly remembered it, and I got at least a B on every test, and I never studied because it
Mm.
was something that was highly interesting to me. So that goes what you're saying back to my point of there was a construct that was put together for what whoever they are decided was important for the next batch of labor and assets to be ready to go execute when they got to the age where they could. And that's where, so I was going to throw this in as well, just as a, I think one of the fundamental things that's there's important for education. One is you've got to learn how to think. How to think is the most important thing. The second thing is you have to understand that language is the operating system of your mind. So whatever words and sentences and concepts you use to frame the reality as you interact with it is going to determine how efficient and how productive and positive your navigation is going to be. And the third, the most important thing, and yes, I are a musician. I've been one since I started playing guitar when I was 13. So I got 53 years of that behind me, is music. With music, literally all the important things that you want to be able to learn about, math, science, history, sound, language, are all taught in just studying music, as well as the music itself. The sonic geometry and the power of sound is one of the most profound things that anybody can experience, and that we all experience in our own unique ways. My daughter is she teaches special education. She's got a number of autistic kids, and the way in which she teaches and works with them is just phenomenal. She's been doing this for about 8 years now, and she's understands, because she grew up with a boatload of music, being my daughter, and she understands the importance and the power of rhythm and sound and sonic frequencies, and she uses it all the time with her special needs.
Music, I think music is a doorway to your soul. You know what I mean? It really does.
It is the universal language, in my opinion.
Oh,
look,
I'm getting whipped.
Yeah, sorry, Gerald. I heard some of my music the other day. You and your wife. Is that correct?
Jane's more the musician than I am. I mean, I started learning how to play the guitar and drums in high school, but I didn't continue it any further other than I liked it. So I didn't join any bands or anything like that. But she's a phenomenal musician. She makes up her own music. And I mean,
Gerald and I were talking the other day.
There's probably 7 or 8 guitars and drums and cymbals and singing bowls, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
but I'm kind of different than you guys. Kind of. I mean, I didn't really have an interest in grade school or high school that I wanted to gravitate towards, but I was very lucky growing up that I was able to memorize very well. So mathematic timetables and all that stuff, I could memorize it. I didn't necessarily learn it, but I could remember what the answer is because I memorized it. Same thing with English. You know, I could memorize the terms, what went with which word. I didn't necessarily know the meanings of them, but I could just remember it. I
hear you. I left school at a very young age. I mean, I did continue school later on in life. I left school at the grand age of about 13. And people in my generation, a lot did leave school at that age, you know, some at 12, believe it or not. When I went to the UK in 65, I went back to school for about 1.5 years, brushed up a bit, went a bit wild, bit of LSD, bit of that, you know, I mean, the old lot, you know, rock band, being a muso myself, mixing with the wrong crowd. And then I joined the army, and then I went back to school in the army, and then I arrived back to Australia, and I got married, and when my daughter was 8 and my son was 5, and lost my wife, and I raised a single dad by myself, and I had to leave had to leave my job to look after my children. So, because my youngest son, he was 5, he was a chronic asthmatic with all the allergies you can think about, allergic to meat, allergic to cow milk. He was literally allergic to everything. And the amount of times I spent times in the hospital with him, wondering if he's going to survive the night. But I done the best I could. Oh, just on a sec, we got somebody else just come in to say hello.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, Brian.
Seeing himself.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Hi.
And,
Nice to meet you, Heidi.
Nice to cyber meet you. I'm all your stalkers. I mean, I'm your, yeah. You get it.
Anyway, listen, hey, come on, I'm going to finish what I'm saying anyhow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had all this free time being a single dad. So I went back to college. I went to what the local TAFE, and I did catched up on some maths, and what I wanted to do was computer science. So I actually I passed about 4 modules, and that gave me a gateway into university. So I took myself to university, became a computer engineer specialist, and it was. I wouldn't say it was easy, but I've always been a battler, as they say. You know, I've always the guy. I never got an A, but I always get just a pass. But then I went into business. And then I had a successful business, and had 5 young, brilliant engineers. And then my grandson just arrived. Hello, and of course, certain things. I mean, you don't realize, and as you get older, the values, certain values, and you think, look, I've got the opportunity. I can either lay down and cry and say, you know, please help me, or do something for myself. And of course, with two young children to actually fight for, and actually I had to fight for them, struggle for them, you know, it wasn't easy, but I don't regret it either, you know. I mean, as you said, it's a learning curve. Everything, life itself is a learning curve, but unfortunately, I didn't get the tools when I was a younger fella. The tools, it was too, the system played it. I mean, there are people will pass, but we also need the failures too, because they're the ones that have to clean up all the mess. You know, because not everybody's going to be a doctor, not everybody's going to be a successful lawyer, but we do need cleaners to clean the toilets, and we do need people to do all the other. That's just as important, but there's also value in work, dignity, but unfortunately, the system doesn't kind of like mainstream system. You want to think differently? Hey, you're a radical. You're not part of the system. You don't comply. You're an idiot. You're a troublemaker, whatever. So what do? So you just kind of wing it, try to do the best you can. But basically it all boils down to, at the beginning, that the molding of that mind, you know, it's the mindset. Because the amount of times in my life, I'd never felt confident in myself. So I deprived myself from trying. Oh, I'm not going to try for that because I'm not smart enough. And that's a concept. I think that's something I think most people experience sometimes in their life. I won't try. I don't think I'll do it. I won't bother. So we're failing before we don't even give ourselves a chance to fail. But failing is an education in itself. How can you be successful if you don't fail? Failing is a building block. I know not to do that. That's a lesson.
Failure is a requirement for success.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Not everybody needs a trophy.
Well, I'm going to bring Brian in and say, "Hello, g'day, Brian. How long are you with us tonight, mate?"
Maybe 45 minutes up to. Depends. I'm waiting on a call. Basically, it's an afterburn party. So this is post Burning Man, and I live in the region of northern Nevada that's actually very close to the Burning Man festival. We didn't go this year. I'm glad about that. But we are supporting the local venue that's holding the afterburn party regionally.
You're looking pretty sharp, man.
Nice.
You're looking sharp.
Yeah, you got the threads going on big time.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Very cool.
So So carry on, Heidi. I'll let you.
Oh,
take the
I was
show.
just gonna like circle back and tell y'all you'd be happy to hear that at our learning center at 3rd grade, which is like for the 9-year change, which is a really big developmental year, strings are brought in. They have to pick up an instrument. And
Nice.
they've been doing recorders since kindergarten, but now they choose between violin, cello, and it's the string and this hand-eye, and it changes something, and they all choose it. And then by 5th, they can pick up guitar, but it's part of the learning the other subjects too. And my son, who's 10, his favorite subject is woodshop. They're doing woodshop, and in that shop now he's developing more mathematical skills, and it all ties together. So yeah,
Amen.
I just was circling back to you on there. Hi, Aaron. That's my buddy Aaron. Woohoo. Yeah, so I'm happy to say that the change is there, but again, it's choices. Parents, I just trying to normalize these choices so they know they have them. And especially that's big in LA. We've kind of been a toilet bowl in our education system, but I'm like, let it fall. It's supposed to collapse. Let it go. We're doing something over here. And people are finding us. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool.
That's one of the things, my rants that I go on a regular basis is that we are actually in a transformative time. It's attributed typically to Chinese philosophy. And I follow the Taoist system of philosophy myself. And that is that you have to be exposed to everything, and you have to determine your resonance with it. It's something that's just the way that you engage with reality and that you inhabit. And when I look at the power of sound and music for me, it's I've said many times that if I wasn't a human being or a spirit having a material experience, I'd be a musical note looking for a tune to play on. I mean, sound and music is just so profound in so many different ways that and I'm really glad to hear, Heidi, that they're exposing them in that, because I mean, there are great musicians, and the music realm is so expansive. It's very rich. It's very eclectic. Everything from, you can make sound and music from just your voice, which is the oldest instrument that we know in our existence, right? And I do voiceover work. I have a indie music label that I started back in the 90s, and I just keep music around me because it's so profound, all the way to doing, the various frequencies for attuning to various parts of your body and your mind. I mean, the expansiveness that happens. And I also say, as far as music is concerned, that when people say, well, give me, and Brian, I'm glad you joined, because I have a question for you from a couple of shows ago regarding this subject, which is time. And when you hear and have conversations and the subject of time travel comes up, there's all kinds of different scientific ways, esoteric ways, the mystic arts, the mystery schools. There's all kinds of different descriptions and ways in which this idea of time travel is discussed and explained. And for me, the simplest experience I think we all have with time travel, especially as you've had time and you've traveled it, is to listen to music. If I listen to something that I grew up with, I am instantly there. I see it, I feel it, I experience it. And that is probably the most regular example of time travel that everybody experiences themselves.
You know what the crazy thing is? You're right what you say.
And you're
right what you say, Dave. You're right what you say, Dave, Prof. Because I remember the amount of times I've traveled across Australia, and I'm on what they call the Nullarbor Plains. You're going about 1,500 miles. I mean, just flat plains. I mean, it's a massive area. And I remember the first time I went across, I was playing ELO music, Electric Light Orchestra. Yeah, exactly.
Love it.
Now, every time now, because
all four of us just did that at the same time, just like we were instantly there.
Yeah.
Thank you for that flashback, B.
Yeah, yeah, hey, exactly. I mean, as soon as I hear ELO, I'm on the knowable planes, man. I'm kind of spiritually there, traveling, elbow on the window there, listening to it, bashing my head, watching the emus running down the freeway.
See, you just proved my point, and
Exactly.
I think that in and of itself, in fact, the Monroe Institute with the Hemisync series, the remote viewers, there's binaural beats, the power of sound to attach and its effect and how it should be attached to learning anything is, I think, going to be one of the things we're going to see as we're going through what I consider a 21st century renaissance. We are actually seeing, and this ties back to what you were saying earlier, Heidi, that I wanted to drop in there. All of the systems, every pillar of our society and the social fabric, education, academia, we've been talking about, the financial system, the media, and just media, not entertainment, just media, and the power of what technology has enabled with the just plethora of content that is everywhere because of technology, and it's all media of some shape or form. All of the institutions, our legal system, judicial system, all of them are showing complete signs of breakdown. They are crumbling under their own weight of ineptness brought on by the boxing of the schooling that I talked about earlier that Ken Robinson goes so beautifully into. The box is broken. The thinking outside the box is long past. The walls are falling down. All the seams are cracked. It is all of it. No matter what the knowledge domain pick any institution, they're all crumbling, and they're in the process of being remade. There's nothing that is there now that can be fixed. It all has to be removed and replaced with an upgrade. So I think humanity in general, we are going through an upgrade that goes into a whole nother rabbit hole of frequencies and consciousness and energy and cycles within cycles and all those kind of things, which I don't think this is on the table tonight.
That's at our school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, those are extremely important.
It's so funny. My first community strikes when I started vlogging in 2020 was all about, I was talking about the systems collapsing, and they just kept taking it down. I'm like, I'm just talking about the systems. I had a friend in a UCLA hospital, this nurse giving me the download. I was sharing a little too much information. But another circle back is the sound frequency. Not only do we have learning blocks for sound and for frequency, but one of our favorite centers, field trips, is out to Joshua Tree at the Tetra. I'm not saying it right. Yeah, we've been. Yes.
Awesome.
And talk about curriculum. This week I was inspired, and it was the creation stories, but I talked about the light within and light versus dark, and the dragon within and taming the dragon. And I swear, on the playground, there's not a day that goes by I don't hear a child talking about portals or something. I
want to go hang out there for a day. That sounds like a great place.
Can I?
And when you said about shutting off,
I'll say this before we continue. One thing that really pisses me off big time, excuse my language, because I think I'm going to hit it. It's a delicate subject. When they're having, drag queens entertaining children in class, I'm dead set against it. I think it's disgusting. It's not normal. It's not normal at all. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll say it. It's grooming. It's just grooming.
Yeah.
And it's wrong, and it shouldn't be allowed. I'm sorry, I just had to throw that in there, guys.
It's all a part of it's all part of the carefully crafted and curated narrative that's been shoved down our throats and up our butts for the last decade at least, and it's gotten really intense and attenuated the last few years. Which brings me to before I forget, Brian,
I want to answer your question, Professor, because I really like that one.
I wanted to ask. Well, I've got a specific question for you, and I need you to help me walk through it, because it goes back to this time travel thing.
Yep.
So, you know, the Montauk work that you've done, and you've worked with the 20 and back perspective and that information. So one of the things that you said in a show a few weeks ago when we were talking about this was the time travelers that have been specifically sent back to nudge certain events in history. And they had to do that in order to prevent something that was either happening in their time or something they saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, aside from the grandfather paradox and all of that, as it relates to the whole concept of it, I'm struggling with trying to understand if someone's in the future, let's say 50 years out,
mm-hmm.
and what was that guy that came back? He was around 2000, 1900s, where he came back specific. He was a John Titor.
Yeah, John Titor, yeah.
Right? So his whole thing was he came back to get some information, apparently, and grab some computer parts of something that they didn't have in the future that they needed to prevent something that was going to happen between then and their future.
Okay.
Right? So the paradox that I'm struggling with is if you're in the future and you know that you can go back and change something so that something else doesn't happen, doesn't it mean that you can't do that and it hasn't happened because it didn't change, which is why they have to go back? Do you see where I'm trying to?
I want to address this.
Of course, if it worked, he wouldn't have come in the first place.
Well, and that's my point. Is
yeah,
that
that's right.
If
apparently
it didn't work because they had to go back and redo it. Is that fair?
Let me tackle it like this. Okay. I think we all in Western society, especially, grow up with a certain conception of time as being linear, as a flow, like one stream is one river. Okay. And I guess we'll go really basic here. First, time doesn't exist. Okay. So let's just start there. So when we talk about time and the idea of bending time and is this possible, you know, and feeling limited, like, well, if I go back and kill my grandfather, then do I just erase myself from time? Great question.
So let me just interject there real quick, just because of the linguistic semiotician side of my head. The word time and the definition of it. Okay. So you're describing the way that it's typically defined and used when people talk about time. Mm-hmm. Whereas the idea of non-local time or different timelines, non-local time or non-local consciousness, which in itself has a time component because you're going from one event to another, right? And there's something that happened between them. Because not everything is happening all at once unless you're in the simulation, I guess.
No. You don't have to be in the simulation for everything to be happening all at once. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think that everything is, in a way, happening all at once. And then there's other dimensions that exist out of what we see as standard time and space. Right. And then this brings us to the Mandela effect, or the Monopoly guy having a monocle or not. You know, that, like, a more recent one, I think, where people are picking up on that one. You know, I think that there's maybe major timeline streams, and there might be a primary timeline stream, and then you get the bad guys, if you will, using things like the Montauk Project and manipulating children to mess with timelines, to try to nudge the parallel timeline away from the one that's written about in the Bible and so many other books and writings. God wins, you know, the light wins. They want to nudge it onto one of the Mad Max apocalyptic vampire Armageddon scenarios where the Illuminati, you know, people win. Okay. And I think in a way, now we're getting like quantum entanglement and vibration and frequency. Well, maybe the people who really, really, really want to live the Mad Max scenario, they're going to get to live that. And maybe the people who want to live the more full disclosure now Star Trek scenario will get to live that as well. I mean, I think that's part of a free choice, you know. But first, I'll start with the law of one, right? We all come from source, and we're all going to go back to source one way or another, right? And then the law of free will, well, we're given free will by source to come out here and explore and play and learn and evolve and whatnot. And then when it comes to time, I mean, just from the experiments that and the things that our fellow, full disclosure now folks can testify to in terms of time and timelines. Yeah, time does not seem to be very rigid necessarily. What I have been told from some of these time soldiers, if you will, is that timelines themselves may be sentient, and they will fight to not be altered and messed with and screwed with. And there probably are a lot of mechanisms in place to just keep you from, hey, why not just travel back through a portal and kill my grandfather to see what happens?
Is it possible? Is it possible that we belong to a timeline? We belong to this moment, which could explain things like deja vu. I've done this before. Oh shit! I've relived it. And it's like I can only give an example for a moment. Back in 1990, finished work. I went home. I was on night shift, and all day long, something's wrong. Something's wrong. I rang around to everybody in the family. Is everybody okay? Yep. No one. There's no problems whatsoever. That night I went to work. I got a call over the two-way radio in the vehicle. They said, "Hey, you better call home." No, mother was in hospital. Okay. They said, "Don't worry, she's sitting up in bed. She's laughing. She's joking. She's fine. Come in after work." And I went in after work. It was 6:00 actually. And she was there, happy, cheerful, sitting up in bed in hospital. My eldest brother came in. Yeah, I've seen all my boys now, and she's talking. Then she was very jovial, and she said, "I'm feeling a bit tired," and so I popped up her pillows and sat her back in it, and she laid back. I had my right arm around her back of her neck, hugging her type thing, and the left hand in my left hand. Within 15 seconds, she passed away. You'll swear she only just closed her eyes to sleep. And I just said to my brother, "Can you please get the nurse?" And he says, "Why?" I said, "Can you please get the nurse?" "Why?" She just closed her eyes. "Get the nurse." And of course, I didn't want to say it because I wasn't sure. I felt it. And the nurse came in. She got out, said, "She said, sorry, your mother passed." And it's like I knew 24 hours before, and it's like the same thing with my father as well. I knew I had to come back. I was working in a mining town, and I said, "I've got to get back to Perth." My dad is in a nursing home. I need to be by his side. I was only back a few days before he passed away, and I was with him the day he passed away. And my wife just looked at me and says, "How did you know?" I said, I just knew. I just knew. You can't. So I think, like people, when they talk about things like ESP or they predict things to going to happen, they visualize it. Maybe they're memories of what I would say, our recyclable life, where we go through life and repeating it until we get it right. It's a learning process. You can't ascend us or whatever. I don't know. We're trapped in a timeline. Just a thought. I'm just putting it out there that it could possibly be. As they say, time and space is totally irrelevant. It all exists within the now.
Well, I'm not. That's one of my trigger words. I'm not going to go there. I want to go back to Brian real quick on this this whole. I can mentally imagine the scenario of somebody being in the future, deciding, that they need to go back and change the past in some way, which is going to, at least in whatever that represents, it's going to alter that existence going forward. That apparently has already happened. So it's something that needs to be erased. And it will be erased because even further in the future, you come back and you drop in and you do whatever you need to do, you affect the future. And then that piece of future, whatever that is essentially erased. But the ripples of the impact through those frequency signatures that are going to be in the future most definitely will have some effect, unknown. And this gets to the point you mentioned, entanglement. So in quantum mechanics and theory and physics, everybody's pretty much come down to the point that everything is Schrodinger and Whitehead. Einstein missed it. Tesla got it. Russell knew it. Keeley knew it. And I think even Faraday and Heaviside and those guys knew it as well.
Bohr and Heisenberg.
Yes. And the whole concept is that nothing is solid. Everything is in motion. Everything is a wave. It's in motion because of the frequency that makes what it is manifest. So if everything's in motion, and it's not like a sinew that everybody's used to seeing on an oscilloscope. It's a toroidal. It's a circular motion, okay, that is twisting within itself. And that has its own cycles. So the whole concept is that everything is wave. Well, a wave, you cannot take a picture of a wave, of a piece of a wave, because the wave is always in motion. And this is the other part of quantum physics that they finally have all come to, is that even the atom is a set of waves and frequency. It is not something solid. You cannot take a picture of something and say that's it, because that's the instance that it was and is no more. Okay. So if everything is a frequency, and then the expression of frequencies is wave, then a wave takes time and space to wave in. Otherwise, it couldn't wave. So the whole idea when people go, well, space and time, it's or time is I mean, just the simple thing of, again, that's one of the reasons I asked you. We talked about the definition.
Okay, how about this? Wait, before we move on, that's an excellent point there, Professor. How can it wave if there's no medium to wave in? Well, I think when we talk about sound and vibration and frequency and particles, to us, that's us here in the 3D, 4D context of time and space as we know it. But we can also say perhaps that time and space don't exist and still waving exists, because there's different types of waves other than just the waves that you and I are familiar with in 3D time and space.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And when you said earlier, we are all from the source and we were returned to the source. My definition is everything is consciousness. Everything comes from consciousness. So that is the source from my perspective. And the habits and nature of consciousness is what we really need, going back to the whole topic of education and the subjects like we were talking about with Heidi earlier. If everything is consciousness, it's this first principle of the Hermetic principles is mentalism. Everything is mental, right? It all comes from mind. So the mind is what consciousness is, and it has habits and natures. And it's one of its characteristics is that it expresses energy. It expresses motion. It is constantly in motion. And I think that one of the characteristics of that motion, and this goes back to what you were saying, Brian, about we're here to learn and to experience and all that. I think that comes from the inherent basic nature of consciousness in its motion. It's always looking, it's always creating, it's always looking for novelty. It's always and this goes to the other subject that people get wound up about free will. You have free will or you don't have free will. It's like, well, the fact that I'm making my own predictive movements, thoughts, changes, ideas, concepts, every interaction with whatever it is I'm interacting with, that's my free will. It's not a program, because I can divert it any second and go in a different direction. So that
let me jump in there. You got free will, but then you might also have soul contracts.
Let me go to that. So let me go to that. So the expression of consciousness expresses motion and movement and creativity and novelty. And that's expressed through its.
Makes me wonder, how do we get to this subject?
I wanted
it's all education.
It's wonderful, though. I mean, listen, we do cover a lot of subjects in this show.
Well, there's Robert time traveling back to 2 or 3 shows ago.
Well, listen, I have a time machine. I have a time machine, and I live in the, when I get in it, I live in the moment. It's called a motor car. I sit in it. I'm in the moment. I look through the windscreen. I see the future. I look in the reading vision mirror. I see me past.
And see, and that's one of the attributes, in my opinion, of this idea of consciousness, constantly in motion and always creating and seeking novelty, is that that's its nature and its habit. So in order for that to happen, the will and the intent and the freedom to do that are other characteristics of this consciousness. Now, to your point about the soul contracts. So to me, consciousness creates universe, creates everything. Its habit and nature is energy. The habit and nature of energy is frequencies. We only know and continually find new realms of frequency spectrum that we didn't know exist. And we have developed amazing tools and techniques and toys to gather telemetry that we didn't know was there, had no idea, but we all depend on it now in various forms. Well, that frequency expression of energy is the expression of consciousness. And one of the habits of creation of consciousness is to create individual frequency stamps of consciousness, which is what we are. We are connected to source because source, we are there because of source, but we are our unique frequency stamp signature of energy that is given the opportunity to be a part of consciousness and those habits and natures of motion, creation, novelty, ergo free will. So as all of these individual frequency stamps have just pop out through all the civilizations and things we know, and that's the other thing about time. It's like, well, wait a minute, how come there's all this old shit if time doesn't exist? You know,
well, how about this? It's not to say that we can't perceive linear time and it doesn't exist in a way, but then you can also say in another way, time doesn't exist. So there's this malleable nature, just like it is or it isn't. And it's kind of a bit of both. That's a quantum entanglement. You spoke to how music can bring you back to like the 80s when you're, rocking it out on a jet ski, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a nature of quantum entanglement where your consciousness, and I'd argue maybe, or some argue that above consciousness or the base of that is soul or spirit, and then consciousness comes off of that, and then the physical world comes off of that. But
I think consciousness creates that frequency stamp is the soul, is the spirit. It is the unique energy set that makes the uniqueness of our individuality. So we are
super intertwined, where it's like you got like a light photon where it's got this component and this component. So you got like a consciousness and a soul component kind of moving together like that.
Because it seems that all souls have this thing called consciousness. It seems like all species have this thing called consciousness. It seems like whether it's the ethereum or the materium, the seen or the unseen, the physical, the metaphysical, there's these constant characteristics of what we perceive as consciousness, which is our ability to have sentience, be self-aware, have our perspective and our individual speculation, because that's why it's not, I don't know if it's why we're here, that I can't say that, but I can say that is a common characteristic among all the carbon-based meat suits that I've engaged with, and the ones that are ethereal in the spirit realm that don't have a material body.
What's your hype on this, Heidi?
I know. I'm like, I'm drooling, listening. I'm like, wow.
I know. It's
I'm IRL right now. Oh, I love it.
We always seem to get into vibrations and
that's what's all about.
We do.
Yeah,
I mean, that's good because everything.
I talk about it with the kids. That's the thing. Especially when you all were talking about. I think the easiest concept for the younger ones, they get frequency. They get it. Am I feeling really good and like feeling the high vibes, or am I feeling low vibes? And case in point, if we have a rough start in the morning or we're trying to rush out of the house and we start snapping, it's like, whoa, we're literally changing the frequency in the house. We have to bring it back down. We go ground ourselves. We do something, or we connect. That's
actually strange you say that, because look, last show I think I brought up a part where you walk down a hallway and people are walking towards you, if you've got a smile on your face, they automatically smile back. It's like yawning. It's contagious, you know? But
sure.
if you've got a frown on your face, you can guarantee people they just kind of look at the floor. I didn't see you. They know you're there. And normally they'll say good morning to you, but they're kind of.
In traditional Chinese medicine, I was a shiatsu practitioner back in the mid 80s, and I had to learn traditional Chinese medicine, and shiatsu is acupressure. So we used, as Japanese, so we used the same meridians and points. We just didn't poke. And since I could remember, I passed out when they took blood from my marriage license back in the 80s. Needles and me just are not friends. And you have to put me out to put a needle in me. So,
which reminds me, everybody, hey, give that little fella a tickle down there. I'm talking about the thumbs up. You're talking about the thumbs up, and hit like and subscribe.
I love it when you use something that I'm talking about to push that in there. So thank you very much. I feel like you met my quota.
It reminds me, I mean.
But my point is that with Ayurvedic, the I Ching, the traditional Chinese medicine, there's all of the Eastern and ancient medicinal systems took a completely different approach to the experience of the body. And what I was going is I was working with a doctor in Atlanta, and she had a practice that covered a whole number of different modalities. She was an naturopath and did acupuncture, everything. So I produced some CDs with her and for her that focused on what they call the Wei Qi. And the Wei Qi are the frequency bands that extend out beyond your body. We are electrical beings, which goes back to the connection with source and consciousness and the energy that manifests us. There seems to be electricity all over the place, or at least what we define as electricity. And even in science, they can't, there's no agreed definition of what electricity actually is. We just know how to create it and use it. But the idea of energy fields is something to the vibrations that you're talking about, Heidi. And Mr. B was talking about when you smile at somebody, what you're doing is you're sending a vibration, a frequency at them.
Yep.
And it's coming from you. And these Wei Qi fields, if you do Tai Chi or Qigong, you can connect with the natural energy fields of the body. And you can begin to have these fields that extend out. I've known people that have gone 50, 60 feet, and you can feel it and see the change from their focus. You can use it for protection. You can use it for healing. I mean, it's just the profundity and the simplicity of it is really amazing.
I just want to say you're going to love this. This is another circle back, but that's how we start our morning. My circle time is Qigong. We do all the elements, and I kid you not. And then and then I bring out some old school theater games, and we pass the clap, but the Qigong moves, and they're into it. They're into it. And then I get us on all fours. Do you feel the vibration from the planet? like it's coming up. I'm now bring it down.
Heidi,
they're into it. These children are into it.
You are giving the gift of life and knowledge to kids that this is the kind of information that they should be exposed to.
Well, that's what if people are upset about what's going on in the world, I'm let's look at the kids, let's shift it, and there's our happy ending.
That's awesome.
Trying to do what I can. It wasn't helping being on set anymore. I was delivering red pills on set for so many years. They called me Craftspiracy, and that was my old world. But I kind of feel like I'm actually getting something back. And I took a major pay cut, but I'm a lot happier. I'm seeing the results.
That's wonderful.
Well, it's awesome for me to hear when I'm talking about things that are important to me, and you go, we're doing that too. Oh, we're doing that.
I want you to know.
This is going on.
And I want viewers to know, this isn't something we have to wait for. We need to plan for. It's coming. It's happening now. And being in LA, we are a target. We have nonstop energy thrown at us to take us down. But as much as there is some dark here, there is a ton of light. We're balancing it out, but we also have a lot of kids here, and we've got to guard them. We're the guardians of these kids, and we're shifting the frequency here.
And that's incredibly important for this renaissance that I'm talking about that we're going through, because I think everything is going to, there's the cycles within cycles thing. There has been a particular pattern in energy frequencies over the last 400 years or so that have been very profitable for those who don't have our best interest in mind. And they have ridden it through several of cycles within it. But that 400-year period, you can see this in different divination tools, astrology, numerology, the I Ching. There's a number of things, even the tarot readers, and you're seeing a confluence of the same types of characteristics. And this cycle is ending. And those that have been writing it, they know it's ending because they can feel their power kind of, they don't feel as good about it, and they're losing support. It's taken a lot more work, and everything they do, they are just doing with incredible ineptness. You're seeing incompetence on levels that, anybody, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, particularly this last 10 years, anybody that's in politics, they couldn't run a chicken shack or start a push mower. And that is scary because they've been given the responsibility to provide some type of administration and governance over the society and the participants in that society. And they have just screwed it up big time. Everything, as I was saying earlier, nothing can be fixed. It all has to be replaced. There's an amazing amount of incredible stuff that's been coming out, and it's going to start really dumping out in the next couple of years, in particular, two things. The most important thing is energy. If you have free energy, then you eliminate a whole bunch of stuff, and you change and empower a whole bunch of things that aren't currently. So the ability to have energy and water, both we can get endless supplies out of the ether, out of the atmosphere. Those technologies are about to get dumped, and it's going to cause a massive disruptive transformation in the world as we know it today.
I have an interesting question.
Yes.
If I may. Sorry for butting in there. Now, with what's going on in the world, between the US and Russia and US and China, but yet we still send companies over there to manufacture stuff for us. It makes me wonder. It's the politics stuff. It's just a front, just to make us all chase our tails, and it's a facade.
It's a show.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in because there's a facade of politics, but then there's a real politic behind the scenes, and right now there's definitely a titanic clash happening in reality. All these Fortune 500 companies pulling out of Russia, and then people not selling oil to each other, and the Nord Stream pipeline just getting conveniently bombed, all of that, and these knock-on effects, like what Professor's talking about, how inept these people are. Well, those knock-on effects are happening on everything, whether it's education, as Heidi's so painfully aware in doing her valiant efforts to turn the tide and very dark spot on this planet, Los Angeles. I did 7 years in LA. I went going on
24.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I know, but, from Chicago.
It's it's a capital city for Tent City, isn't it?
Some parts, yeah.
Yeah.
Parts.
Well, the only thing that I have to say is on California, because I was born there, I spent my first 28 years there from the 50s through the 80s. And that's when it was paradise. It was awesome. Yeah. We drank from the water hose. There was no phones, no computers, no shit. We just had all the rock and roll and great music and all that. We didn't have the crowds. We didn't have the immigration. None of that. So I'm just want to make the point that at one time it was awesome. It
Well,
breaks
yeah.
my heart to see what they've done to it now.
I believe-
Well, there's places. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's strong. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's like the darkness, it doesn't come in as like wearing the ugly boogeyman mask right off. It's got this really beautiful, shiny, sexy, attractive,
Benevolent bullshit.
So
Yeah.
do you think
so it
what's
started
actually
as
happening?
rap and rock and
Do you think it's actually what's happening in politics at the moment in the US? I mean, look, I'm an outsider looking in. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, it boggles me. It boggles my mind what I'm seeing, what's happening in the US, and it's like Biden's in there doing his thing, and it's like, is it they're trying to kind of stir up the people that they will take a radical change? That I mean,
So
it's staged. Do you think it's all staged?
yes,
It's like,
yes,
Oh,
it's
yes.
staged.
Yes.
100%.
It is a
Biden-
show. It's a
Biden
complete
is not on
show.
Air Force One.
let's screw
Yeah.
the general public. Let's screw the general public right down to the bare knuckles, right? And we'll put up
By
a fight.
choice.
Yeah, and
How
but
about
They
this?
choose to fall for
the
it. They
savior's
choose
on
to
the
do it.
side, as they say. The savior's on the side, ready to come in like a knight in shining armor.
There is
riding his white stallion, right?
We
So
are.
that actor is not in the wings or behind the curtains, because there is no savior that's coming in.
Exactly.
It's the energies and the people who are going
We do
to
it.
move this thing forward into the change that needs to happen. And like the famous phrase, be the change you want to see. But the rest of the stuff that you're talking about, be at least in my perspective, and this is global, this ain't just the US. This is all a show. We've basically got at least 2 or 3 movies on one screen. And they're carefully crafted and curated to capture the craniums of the clueless. How many C's was that?
Well said.
but that is, I tried to make that as simple as possible. But the idea is that it is a show, and it's designed to captivate and to cause all of the consternation and chaos that's going on purpose, because the more confusion and chaos occurs, then the more division and frustration and conflict occurs. And that is purely by design. And it goes back to what I was saying about my 400-year cycle. These folks that are doing this shit, whether they are conscious, and there are some, there's no doubt, this whole concept of energy and frequencies and cycles within cycles is not limited to those of us who have gone around, poked into that information, and learned about it. This is stuff that is of the highest order in the minds of those who are trying to exercise their control over everything. They understand this, but they don't know how to deal with it. They just know that the main thing is the energy they've been riding is waning. It's dissipating. They are running out of gas, essentially, and there's nothing they can do about it. So one of the expressions as a result of that, coupled with the ineptness and the incompetence of just being able to do something and go through it and to completion, is that they've gotten to the point where they know that there's nothing else they can do. They don't think ahead in plan B or C. They do plan A, they go at it, and one of the biggest problems with emotions is having a concept of being goal oriented without a system or a process to achieve the goal. So when you have an ideology that is designed to have constant confusion and chaos about your identity and all the different forms, your gender, your race, your status, your class, your skills, all the different things that define our identity, they've shoved as much confusion into that as possible to create that chaos of confusion, which naturally results in conflict, because people don't even know why they're having a conflict a lot of the times, or the ideas and things that they are emotionally about have not been vetted in their own minds, because they have been told what to think instead of how to think. So now you have this puppeteer show, strings are all wearing out, shit's starting to break off, they can't do it anymore. In the process, the ones that the sheeple and sleeple that they've tried to contain through control are starting to have just when you going back to the consciousness thing, if you resonate with something, you experience that. If you don't resonate with something, you experience that. Well, when you start seeing a whole bunch of crap and shit piled up all around you and constant mayhem and chaos, and you go, I used to think that was okay, or I didn't even think about it because I wasn't paying attention to it. But there's so much of it out there now that I'm having a hard time not paying attention to it. And the more I pay attention to it, I start going, wait a minute, I'm not resonating with this. There's something that is wrong. I need to ask questions. I need to find out more information about this, because going back to the language thing, the word I was given for what I'm seeing does not apply to the way I'm feeling or the experience I'm having. So I have to go investigate that word at least. And what is the definition behind it? What have they done to my words? I mean, I've called everybody sweetheart since the 60s, because my parents were from Oklahoma and Kansas. I was raised Midwest cornbread fed. And those were the, accountability, responsibility. You get off your ass, you're on your own, go make it happen. And that's the way that I was raised. So when I see all of these people now that didn't have that benefit, that have adopted information and all these character types and all this curriculum and all of this crap that has been designed to cause confusion, they're starting to go, I need to have another look. So I think what we're seeing as a part of this renaissance is what I'm calling the rise of the pissed off peeps. And it is a growing, natural, organic thing, because regardless of if you've taken a dive into any of the deep subjects and tried to see what history really is, which is not what we've been told, what science really is, but not what we've been told, what health really is, but not what we've been told, all of these important knowledge domains are going to get a complete makeover. And it's going to come from the people that are looking at it going, the stuff I've been seeing has got some problems. I need to go have a look for myself. They look, they get educated, they connect with other people of like minds and start sharing information like we're doing here. And all of a sudden, you're getting an awakening on its own, an organic awakening. And what I also call the great rethink, because I think what's happening is everybody's having a chance to stop and rethink. I mean, one of the offshoots of the pandemic and the lockdown crap was that everybody had a chance to go contemplate their navel. And then not a lot of people took advantage of it and made the most out of it, but some people did, and a lot of people did. And I think we're seeing that. I think there's an awakening. I keep hearing about the Great Awakening and things going on. Well, the cycles and the energies from my studies indicate that would be happening on its own. And the information that I'm seeing with what's going on in the reality, and as I interact with it, and I glean the data feeds and go, wow, what the hell's that over there? What's this? It seems to be leading towards this transformation. It's going to be very disruptive, but it's going to be incredibly positive on the other side.
I agree. I think I have to leave soon, so I just want to jump in for a little bit here. I'm getting called away now, but it's I'm a prepper survivalist guy. In addition to being a volunteer with a Full Disclosure Now movement, right? So that the people know the truth about everything from free energy to certain islands where politicians are more concerned about minors, right? As the song goes. And the thing is that from now 2023, 2024 to 2030, I kind of see as being, and others see as being, kind of a rough ride, if you will. But kind of like, if you could make it through that and raise your frequency and organize with others and try to strengthen yourself and your communities about you, and you make it to 2030, woohoo! Here we are to build our Star Trek future. That's kind of about the timeline that I've got projected down.
Well, I don't believe we're going to get disclosure. I think they're going to keep playing this ball game for many more years to come.
Well, not disclosure from the top down. It's disclosure from the bottom up.
Yeah, but yes. I mean, there's stuff they're going to say is classified, and they're not going to talk about that stuff. They're not going to let people know.
That's the thing is, the people at the top, they can talk about classified this and classified that all they want. But there's going to come a time when people are going to be coming out with like UFO parts, or like a body, a very respectable body of an alien, or
we're hearing that talk. We're hearing that talk all the time, but nothing's happening.
Well,
because
we're in
all the
human
testimonials get shot down. All the testimonials get shot. We need this. We need those that have testimonies. The real people, they're getting shot down and they're getting suppressed because of all this. Like, it's still a war. It's full-time war right now. I'm going
to throw a linguistic nugget on the table here about this disclosure. The real disclosure happened a millennia ago. The disclosure is really about the way that it's been positioned and people have been thinking about it is, are we alone? Well, that's been answered millions of years, at least hundreds of thousands of years ago. And at a minimum,
that's all it is.
And a minimum, at least 20 or 30 decades ago, or millennia ago. So that is part of the control that they're using for this definition of this word disclosure. I've got I need to send you some pictures I've got that are very similar to that, Brian. That's awesome. But the disclosure that's really the big issue now is the fact that all of the technology that was gained from whatever has been captured or found over the last 7 or 8 decades has been hidden. And it would have completely transformed the society and the world that we have today had it not been sequestered and kept in the hands of the few. That disclosure, I think, is what's really going on, or what's about to happen. And that also is going to be a contributor to this great unwashed mass of the pissed off peeps as they rise. Because when people find out that, hey, what do you mean? Wait, we didn't need all this infrastructure and all this intermediators and institutions and shit to be able to have energy.
It's all this BS that's going. It's all BS. It really is. I mean,
let me give you an example of false narratives real quick and timelines. Tartaria. I really suspect that a lot of this time travel shenanigans occurred for these guys to go back and erase things like Tartaria from the map and from history as we know it. And at the same time, there comes a point where so many people are starting to find out about ETs or Tartaria, the truth about our governments and secret societies, that you need way too much time travel for them to try to erase all of that from the consciousness and the timeline. Good luck. So I think that's where 2030, like if you talk about Project Looking Glass and all that, it seems like the bad guys kind of gave up because they saw a timeline where no matter what, no matter how many shenanigans they do, by 2030 they lose and we, the people, quote unquote, win. So, but on that note, I want to run and thank you for hosting me here with the rest of our fine compatriots.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, Brian.
Professor Terrence, Aussie Sue and crew.
Brian, great to see you again, and do those threads justice. Thanks, man. Right on.
Thank you. Oh yeah. Cheers. God bless everybody. Thank you.
See you
Happy
later,
Saturday.
Bye. Well, then that's wonderful. It's the thing that gets to me is they got this tech. We know they've got technologies. We do know that. And but the thing is, they keep bringing up, and I keep bringing this up. They talk about global warming. They're worried about this and they're worried about that. Now, if they were really worried about it, they would be doing something about it. Unfortunately, the only thing they're talking about is this carbon tax. So we know what road they're going down. Now, when they talk about global warming, which I've mentioned many times before, they talk about the ice sheets on the west coast of Antarctica breaking away, melting. Now, by all means, anybody out there can just Google it and ask how many active volcanoes underneath that. There are about 9 active. There are 9 active volcanoes, but there's actually 3. Actually, there are 9 volcanoes, 3 active at the moment under that ice sheet, exploding, letting out magma, you name it. I mean, of course, people say, "Oh, you know what fire and ice is like? It'll suddenly freeze up again." Not with a sudden explosion, like volcanoes erupt. They're going to break things. It's going to cause a lot of damage. And of course, the the warm water it creates is going to melt it and it's going to break off the ice sheet. But they don't want to talk about that. You don't hear about these active volcanoes. They're not going to tell you about it. Then they talk about, but what about the glaciers, the melting? Well, how do the glaciers look like? They look like frozen waterfalls. Why do they look like? Because they move and they go through what they call a 40-year cycle of thaw and a 40-year cycle of freeze. And it's constantly evolving, constantly moving. And people don't understand this. They really do not understand that there is a cycle to everything. Now, science that turn around, if you listen to what the scientists say, we are heading out of an ice age. We're still coming out of an ice age. The planet itself goes through a cycle. So, but what? So what's the global warming? 0.04, right? Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is nothing. If you quadruple it, it's still nothing. But then they, as I was talking to Gerald earlier on, they talk about, first the ozone layer. I mean, they banned CRCs gases because of the ozone layer.
CFCs,
Yes. But did they talk about the 2,200 nuclear thermal bombs actually detonated in the atmosphere, especially the hydrogen bombs? No, they didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
Did they talk about that in 1970 when they done an international ban on nuclear blasts, on a global sense, right? That the planet was 2 degrees warmer in 1970. You can Google all this stuff. It was 2 degrees warmer than what it is today. But yet
that's just one of the big tools in the box that they've got to beat people over the head with. It when you look at, and again, it's the terminology. You started with the global warming. The telemetry, you said, well, we're not getting the warming. Okay, well, let's change it to climate change. So, climate changes. And you can get into all of the weeds and all of the different, apparently, at least the last study I saw, the IPCC, which is out of the UN, does all the governing stuff and was the official voice of climate change. They use less than 8% of the available data in their models. The models, the math, and the machines. They're all flawed, and they're flawed, half of them on purpose and the other half on ignorance. Mm-hmm. The simplest thing because when I first heard the global warming back in the 90s, I was like, oh, I'm getting on that. We don't want any of that shit because, I've traveled the world a little bit and I've seen stuff. And so then I started digging into it. I started doing my own research and I'm looking at it and then watching the data as it continually unfolds, because that's a wonderful thing about time and data is the more evidence that you have to help tweak your model and your math and whatever components go into your formula to try to figure out what the hell you're looking at. But the easiest thing is this. The Earth has only had an ice covering in the last 500,000 years based on the science that's used to do the climate modeling. Before that, it was a much warmer place with no ice. So ice is a relatively new in our 4 billion, whatever the number they've got right now. Ice is 500,000 of that 4 billion and it's only the last part of Earth of our time where there's ice. We are going into a colder period of the planet by nature. There's nothing we can do about it. And, it's interesting how people get on the idea of the CO2 component and don't realize that we exhale CO2. Yeah. So any attempt to try to mitigate or manage the CO2 includes all the humans.
And what do trees live on? Hey, what do trees live on? CO2, carbon dioxide. Oh, yeah. Trees live on, grass lives on, everything lives on it.
It's required for life. Right.
Exactly right.
I was going to say, when I checked out of this entire manufactured narrative, I worked an Al Gore telethon for climate change, or for the war on, and it was a huge event here in LA, star-studded, Moby, what's his name, science guy, everything. It was a vegan set, which I was hired for because I worked with a lot of vegan directors. I do all the things, but it was everything was biodegradable and like all this great stuff. But the entire set build was under Argyle skies, yellow haze, everyone's coughing, no one wanted to talk about it. This poor my assistant, poor little thing, she's like, can you not do that thing you do at this job, please? Like, wait till we get a paycheck. Because I was going to tell everybody what's up. But the kicker was we were in, the white wedding kind of tents, the production tent, and I was crafty and I took care of all the talent and the crew and everybody. But we had one little flimsy little plastic wall between me and the segment producers, and they were doing their production meeting. I heard segment by segment what was going to happen for the big live telethon. And it was the Honduras caravan. It was everything but the weather. And not only the weather, but the crazy Argyle skies that were literally making a pattern, and yellowness haze was all around us. No, it was all manufactured. And I was like, I'm just chopping. I'm like, I'm waiting for my paycheck. But I kind of blasted on the socials after that. But I was like, I'm done. I'm walking out. And then I tried, it was a lot.
Well, Heidi, what did you think of the people so you're there as the one who's awake and paying attention, and you're watching all these other people that are just ignoring it. What do you attribute that to?
Well, cognitive dissonance. I mean, they're you know what it is? It's da 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 da. It was all show. Everything was show. I was the show. I had the fancy food and look at this fancy little bamboo fork. Ooh, it was like, look at the sky. Look at your cough. Like it was all bells and whistles. And what kept me sane is I had already started hosting gatherings out here in LA, and we had all conscious gatherings. We had guest speakers and everything. So I was able to vent and find my people. But I kid you not only my team that worked for me, but the production team, everybody that was there. I usually found a couple like minds, but on this job, it was like 2, and there were like 300 of us there. So it was I was a little like, oh my gosh, like we're doomed. But I had my peeps to go to, and we grew so big, we kind of stopped doing it. But it was a big eye opener of like, this has nothing to do with our weather. This is all programming. And they made millions that weekend. Millions. And I also think twice about everybody who walked in the room. I remember chopping something, and my little Frenchie assistant, I think it was Moby, someone who walked in, I go, that's a cannibal. I'm like, just chopping. She goes, just keep working. I'm like, that's another pedo. And I'm like, she's like, I'll deal with the people. You turn around and chop. And I'm like,
I find it fascinating that these people, that are on the climate change bandwagon, they're typically of a vegan nature, and one of the big pushes is, you got to stop eating meat because all cows do is eat grass and fart. And I look at them, I go, you mean like a vegan?
and they're fake.
They do the same thing, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, these celebs, I get all their writers and everything, and half of them, they just hide in my room and eat a whole tub of beef jerky. It's all a show. It
makes you wonder how these idiots get to where they are.
Puppet masters. Well, there's a lot of stories for that.
Remember what I was saying about the way the schooling and education system was set up to take a mold and then stamp out labor assets and usable humans that they could then put into their system. That's what that is. Those people, in my opinion, people that get into those cliques, they're really cults, because it is a mind control, and it is an absolute adherence and acquiescence to whatever the hell it is they say you have to do, think, look, smell, who you can integrate with and who you can't. I mean, there's a complete control of for those people in their minds. And I think that is also that group of people are going to end up in a part of this rise of the pissed off peeps, because some of them are going to be the most extreme and expressive and aggressive, because they're going to have that, holy shit, I was way over here, and now I realize I was way over in the wrong place. You got a bunch of people in the middle, they're not even paying attention. There's no, wait a minute, what's this? Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
the people that have been horse-waggled and tied up into this ideological groupthink bubble, those people are going to get pissed, and they're going to explode all over the place, start, just getting really out of control. And those are the ones I'm most concerned about.
And I think that's the rough ride Brian was talking about, because it's certainly happening out here. One of the most, Glendale, very affluent neighborhood. They were on the news. Well, they weren't even on the news. I don't know if it made the news, but they were revolting against the school system. They're like, get this out of our curriculum. Like, they're rising up. People that I never would have dreamt of. I do get a random DM here and there from a crew member that's like, this is all the stuff you used to talk about, right? like you were onto something, Crafty. And I'm like, yeah, you want to talk ETs next? what do you want to do? But they're all like, it's an uprising. I feel it out here. So like, I live in LA, but I'm not of it. I'm kind of on the outskirts and very grounded, but I can't go in. The frequency is so different in West Hollywood and LA now. And
plastic.
It's
plastic.
Yeah. And just, it's literally, you feel it. Your skin goes, and your heart goes, and you're like, and then, I was going to circle back the weapons and the tech. I've been teaching my kids. I haven't brought it into the center yet, but my kids, 1 year Santa brought all Fairway blankets and blue blockers and tabs for everything. It was like, I'm like, wow, it's 2020. Santa knew we needed a healing Christmas. Look at that. That's so cool. We still use them. So they know that once in a while our C1, C2 get knocked out. We're like, was that a pulse? They hit us once in a while and we have to recover. That's our war. So we have to have shields up. We got to vibe so high and dodge and weave. And if we get hit, we detox, we manage it, we recognize it. Like, that's the war. This is going to go on for a little bit, I think. But as we already know that, we can way show to others, especially teach the young ones how to navigate, and we'll get out of it, because there's a lot, the tipping point happened. It's a lot different than when I did that telethon. There's a lot more people now going, something's not right. That was a tangent.
So yeah, but
tangents now.
You're seeing precisely what I'm describing is there is. I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and this is going to put an additional burden on those of us who are already further down the road on these subjects and the understanding and knowledge that we're talking about, that they are just now coming to awakening to. So we're going to end up having to help these people. We can't just let them go off on their own, because they'll crash into something, and possibly even ourselves. So at a minimum, you have to have your head on a swivel and pay attention for any incoming that you may not be planning on. But there will be incoming, particularly with family and friends and people that, this whole, both the political and the medical institutions have just been completely trashed over the last 5 years, and in a big way. And those are two areas that people hold very emotional and strong feelings about. And that has caused an amazing amount of division simply because of the inability to have enough respect for one another, to have their own ideas, and not push an emotional demonization on them because they don't think like you. And that is another one of those, they taught them what to think in that case, not how to think. So I've been told to think that this is the right way, and this whole climate change is the right thing. Trust the science. Like, no, it's not. There's a lot of information that if you knew about, you might not have that opinion. You might not have that viewpoint. And I was just trying to find, I've got this great picture. You guys, everybody's probably seen Iron Man, right? And he's always out there on a stage with lights behind him, and he's got his arms out at this Stark Expo and all that. There's a great picture of him doing that, and above it is me walking into family events after my conspiracy theories come true.
Yeah.
It's like, yep, I told you. And I think, there's a lot of us that are experiencing that. And so we have to, my point is that there's going to be a lot of people that are not going to handle this change real well. this knowledge apocalypse is what I called it on my shows. It's the end of the curated narrative. That this information is going to flip some minds into ways that they were never knew existed, let alone are prepared for. So that's going to cause some extreme reactions and freakouts that we're going to have to help them with. We're going to have to make sure that we're at least watching out for them, because they might bump into you and you may not want that. But for the ones that you want to help and shepherd, that actually look for additional help, that are asking for you to help, we got to give it to them. We got to help them through this so that we can all get through this next phase together.
Well, my friends, we have reached that 2-hour mark, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And Heidi, hope you come again with us and join us anytime. I'll always send you, if I see you there saying hello, I'll send you a link. You're more than welcome to join us anytime and join the team. And
thank you so much for letting me play with you big boys too. That was fun. Thank you. I'm on this side
Heidi,
now.
it was a real pleasure, Heidi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Silent but deadly over there. I see you.
And it's nice to have a lady on board. I mean, it puts a tame these.
I didn't swear.
No, they didn't either. Isn't that wonderful? I think I swore more than. Wow. See what happens when there's a lady around, eh? And Gerald, thank you very much for joining us, mate. And look, mate, maybe next time we'll pick one of your subjects. Now,
I could have talked about any of these subjects you guys talked about, but I was just fascinated with all you guys were saying. There really wasn't much more to add other than I could have talked about frequency, could have talked about portals, could have talked about soul travel or soul family.
Yeah.
Me and Jane's into all these subjects, but I was just like listening to everything you guys were saying.
Unfortunately, when Robert and Brian get together, and it's even worse when you got Jim Goodall on with us. I mean, I'm going.
What was this happening? Space on your screen, I guess.
Yeah, but look, listen, it's always a pleasure being with you guys. It really is, and it's nice to have a new addition to the family here. Yeah, how about that, Heidi? Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining us.
That was a treat. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And Robert?
Sir.
Professor Bauer,
I'll take
thank you very much.
Oh, do I log out then? Yeah.
Well, you can do whatever you want. You can hang on.
He kicks us out all just whenever he decides, yeah.
You can hang on.
He does it. Okay.
No, okay. We'll just kind of just put yourself off the screen there, just blank yourself out and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. But I'll just do the closing. So as I always say, thank you, everybody. Be nice, be kind. And most of all, aspire to inspire one another, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? Is to help lift each other and let's all rise up together. I tell you, you've got to love life, mate, and love each other. Be kind. Have a good one, guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.